let's talk. So, I have a new special guest, a very interesting person. His name is Isaac Chambers. I am so glad that you decided to come on the show. And I'm so sorry we had all these kinks that we had to work out. Next time we'll get this right.
Oh, no, thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on the show. And I didn't want to share too much of your bio. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've got a pretty crazy testimony. I've been through a lot, everything from childhood abuse and trauma all the way up through a very strict religious upbringing with spiritual abuse. And then, um, you know, uh, I even had some infidelity that I had to fight. I had some alcoholism that I had to fight, and all these things eventually were things that God gave me freedom from. So that's kind of where I am today.
You were telling me what you said religious abuse. What was that like? That could be anything. How was that for you coming up in your household?
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody, with a different background is going to have a different story. So everything's going to be a little unique to them. Now, in my scenario, what I ended up having to deal with was, as a child, I was raised in a very strict religious home, and that was enforced upon me with physical abuse in the name of God. So it's like, you can't do this, and so I'd have a lot of um, physical repercussions that were far beyond spanking. Don't get me wrong, I'm from the South. I believe in a good spanking. But that kind of abuse kind of gives you a different perspective to where you can kind of look at it and say, okay, well, that affected me then, but it does affect you long run, which is something that I had to run into later down the line for sure.
That's why I asked, was you a PK or preacher's kid? Because, when we come up, we're thinking that our parents are so strict on us that we can't do anything. Is that what you meant when you said that type of abuse? Um,
No, I mean, in a way. Now, I think that there's a little bit of a difference because preacher's kids are more, I wouldn't say disciplined like in an abuse way, but I do think that they are um, legalistically tied to certain parameters around their structure that they have that they definitely need to break down and reevaluate. So, yeah, that's kind of a big part of it. Very big part of it.
was it something traumatic like in life that made you feel? I know you was talking about having anxiety and depression. What led to that? I mean, is that from the abuse in the home, or is that something? Did something else traumatic happen in your life?
Yeah, so I had a lot happen. When we look at it from the lens of, we had all this abuse and, how did that affect you long term? That affected me in a lot of ways because when you have any abuse that's coming from the maternal side of your upbringing, that's going to put a huge damper on how you feel, and depending on what happened is going to depend on how you interpreted it. So if someone in particular interprets it um, in an incorrect way, what can happen is, the way that I interpreted it is that I would never have a certain level that I was going to be able to reach to where I wouldn't be under the pressure of abuse. So, that affected me long term. I had multiple relationships with women that were mostly toxic, out of my own doing because I was still trying to reach that level. Like maybe there's just another woman out here that I can reach that level of pleasing them, and that will fill that hole.
What was that
And
like in
then,
your teenage years? Was that teenage, or is
I
that
mean,
like in 20s?
that was that was teenage years all the way through the 20s, um, because you know I even ended up having an affair and struggled with infidelity. that God later healed between me and my wife. But understanding the root cause of it is what ended up to me actually healing from that. Um, and then, from a spiritual standpoint, if you kind of consider that and all your upbringing and how you can't really control it, you can kind of learn to get mad at God in a way. So, you'll harbor all that and say, okay, well, I never met any standard that my parents were able to set for me as a child, and so I view God as this demanding person that I'm never going to be able to reach a standard for.
Oh, so it was like, okay, I get it. I think I got it. So it was like the religion kind of controlled life for you, and it was like a standard that you felt like you never could meet up to because you just wanted to be free. Is that
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So it's
So
like I have to do everything by the Bible or I'm going to get the tar kicked out of me.
that, yes, okay. So yeah, that's just like it sounds like growing up in a house, a PK kid. Um, And you
Yeah.
was talking about, did you marry early? Did you guys get married at a young age?
Um, no, not really. I kind of waited because in my teens I actually fell into alcoholism and I was an alcoholic for, probably about 8 to 10 years. Made a lot of stupid decisions. Um, and that infidelity and stuff followed me. But I met my wife probably about 11 years ago. I'm in my 30s now, so it was 20. I was like 20. I don't know. I was like 2021 when I met her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's been 11 years now, but we've had to work through a lot of stuff in regards to that. But it it was something I was in denial about, that I probably would have never looked at, if some other stuff didn't happen. So
I know you were saying that you loved listening to, what was it, Marilyn Manson? Was that one of your dark days?
I did. I was a fan, and yeah, I don't know whether you agree Marilyn Manson is satanic or not. Intention means a lot. So, if it's there and you have a heart for the dark, then that's dangerous. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And you were saying, so at what point, what was your breaking point? Because at some point, I think we have a moment in our lives where we say, we're at the fork in the road and it's time to make a decision about life. What was the breaking point?
Um, well, if you asked me now, I would say that there were many breaking points. Very, very many breaking points. Um, Now, when I was an alcoholic and struggling with infidelity and all that, of course, and eventually got stuck in a cycle of depression. Um, so I'd drink a certain amount, I'd get to a certain point, and then I would try killing myself or doing something like that, which would then be the new low. And so that kind of kept going in a cycle. So when I was a kid, I used to always be a cutter. And then when I grew up, that evolved into, um, which is a crazy story because my wife had to punch a window in and come and cut me down from a noose.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, it's a crazy,
What were you,
marriage story.
what was going on like that time at that time? What were you feeling in those days? Or is that where you were still struggling with the alcoholism?
That was when I was still struggling with alcoholism. When you're struggling with a thing such as, infidelity, when you're trying to start a family with somebody and you just keep struggling and you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and it gets to the point where you're like, that on top of having that foundation of I'm never going to be good enough for anybody, or just generally feeling worthless as a child because of that, it kind of all piles up over time. And so it does, it eventually gets to be too much. Jesus says come to me, like, because he gets it, right? Like our burdens are really heavy sometimes.
And he'll meet us right where we are. Like that's what it means that come to me, right? And I'll make your burdens light and your my yoke would be easy. Your That's what that means, but I'm trying to understand. So, because you don't know what we don't talk about that part of religion where it sounds like it was the manipulation, it was the mind control that puts you in a place where you felt like you could never measure up. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's happening in the church too right now today. That puts people in a place where they feel like they can never measure up. Now, I'm not talking about um, the messages where if you don't stop sinning, you're going to hell, because those is the kind of like, I think those messages are to kind of like get us back on track. But it's a different side to that. All of that, this religious, the standard that they're talking about that we have to live by, that like beating somebody over the head with that this is what I'm trying to understand, if this is the religious abuse that you dealt with in your life, because we hear it come in different forms and fashions, but um I've seen the manipulation, the mind control, the witchcraft in the church, that type of abuse, but you dealt with it in your home. Like that really, it just seems like that really played. It's almost like when I was a child, I was always bullied for a long time. That did something to me. That kind of like damaged me. And I used to have this lady that would always say, because my skin was dark, she was a dark woman too, but she always would say, "You're so black." At a little girl, at receiving that as a little girl, growing up every day, every time this person saw you around the clock, that did something to me. And so when I got to teenage years, 20s, I still thought that about myself. I really did. And it wasn't until I stepped into accepting Jesus as my Lord and Savior, I started seeking Christ. And I got somehow, the messages that were coming from the Lord was telling me how he loved me. And I was thinking, how could you love somebody that was so dark and so black? And it was just
Mm.
like, for years I thought that my skin was ugly, my skin was dark, it was black, and it wasn't anything that God could do with me. I felt so dirty. I mean, I did, until I came into Christ and he started showing me the way that he saw me. And it wasn't that. It was beautiful. The way he was in love with his children. He called us children. We're children. We have been accepted unto the beloved. It wasn't until I came to Christ that I learned that the love of God just transformed. It just did something to my esteem, my confidence, how I viewed myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think about that. I mean, you're right with from the evangelical side when you grow up depressed and kind of from that spiritual abuse that you've had the Bible beating you over the head the whole time saying you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner and it's like I get it, right? And no one ever showed me the flip side of that coin.
So you were
Um,
physically abused with that. Like you were actually literally hit over the head with the Bible, stuff like that.
I mean, not with the Bible,
Oh,
but
okay.
I mean, yeah, physical, yeah. Um, but we were, and so that gets in your psyche. You're like, you know what, and especially with the evangelical movement, which I love, but when we're consistently hitting the damning message of what sin does to us and how sin causes death, how do we um we're looking at it, we're saying, okay, sin causes death, but however, there's a flip side to that coin because when I was growing up, all the stuff was like sin causes death. You're a terrible person. You're a terrible person. And I was like, oh my gosh, there was no redeeming. And so it took a long time to be able to come around to that for sure.
Yeah, if you constantly hear something like that, then where's the love?
Right.
That
Yeah.
is damaging.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't feel a whole lot in that regard, but I didn't think of it till the other day how that impact on on African Americans could be, like when it comes to your identity and racism and stuff like that. Because like I
Mm-hmm.
never thought of that from my angle naturally,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to identity, you know, we're all children of God, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's no like distinguisher. There's no
Right.
Jew or Gentile.
He
There's
doesn't
nothing.
see color. He doesn't see it. I mean, there's not
Right.
in his eyes. He just loves us all the same.
He just sees you as a kiddo.
Yeah. We're nothing. I mean, he's not a respecter of persons, but um for all of us it's just love, you know, without the separation. There
Yes.
is, just like in church, there is no such thing as denomination because there's not going to be separation and segregation in heaven. There's none of that. There's no Baptist, Catholic. None of that. You
There's
understand
no
what I'm saying?
theological disagreements up in
About the
heaven.
story. Tell us about that
Absolutely
story. You was
not.
telling me about the
So
angel.
tell me, you were if you would like
Yeah.
to share.
Yeah, kind of what you mentioned earlier, like God's, he meets us where we're at. And there was one moment where I had overdosed. I had done an overdose attempt and been sent to the hospital, put under observation, and then I had to be kept at a facility for however long the law said. I don't remember. I think I was in there like 5 or 7 days, something like that. And when I was in there, it was kind of scary with the kind of people that are in there sometimes. Not that there's anything wrong with those people, but there are some things that make you kind of like, I don't know if he's gonna lose it. Like we're all cool here, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, for instance, there was a guy getting held back behind the counter, and he got a that syringe shot in his neck.
Mm-hmm.
He's being held behind the counter by two guys, and somebody shot his neck with a syringe just to be able to sedate him to go to bed. Sounds really scary. And while I was there, God sent me a little bunkmate while I was in there, and his name was Scott. And he helped me out with a lot. Um, and so I was scared of who I was going to get, and God gave me someone who said, "Hey, let's do a Bible study and work out together." And we did. We were doing like 100 push-ups a night. We were reading a few Bible chapters together. So I do feel like Scott was still an angel in some way, for sure.
Feel like he was sent there and to push you forward to make you keep going.
When I wasn't willing.
Yeah. It's like he was telling you, do you have those encounters like he's telling you to keep moving forward in spite of, in,
Yeah.
in spite of what's going on? Well,
'Cause
look,
Yeah,
I
I'm
read
still
on your
here.
thing,
Just
it
for
said left for dead. I was reading on your page. What does that mean? Is that a testimony? What happened?
Oh yeah, I was definitely left for dead. No, that's tricky. So when you have a lot of trauma, and a lot of it builds up, there you will eventually get to a time where your body can't take it anymore. Um, and that this can manifest itself in many different neurological disorders and different things. Now, in my particular case, it has manifested itself in a disorder that is called dystonia. Um, I Now dystonia is kind of a different disorder because it's basically the brain sending the muscles to, or the brain sending the messages to your muscles. It's also sending them to the opposite muscles. So think of it when you reach out to open a doorknob and you activate two muscles. When I reach out to turn that doorknob, I will activate four because I'm not only going to activate those ones trying to open it, it's also going to activate those ones trying to close it.
Hmm.
Um, so I got that, and when I got that, my wife decided that um, she did not want to spend the rest of her life with someone like me.
Hmm.
Someone who couldn't work or type or do any of that, um, really in much of a regard at all.
Hmm.
So I felt pretty worthless. Um, but yeah, during that time, my wife just said, "I don't care where you go." She sent me to or she didn't send me anywhere. She just said adios amigo. And so I went and ended up staying with my brother for about 8 to 10 months, somewhere around there. Um, almost an entire year,
Mm.
and it was really really difficult. Um, and Yeah, it was really difficult because I didn't have anything. I didn't have a job, so I didn't have money. I had a car. I could live out of my car, but
Mm-hmm.
there was no like tomorrow.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Five.
Um, yeah. So that in that way, I feel like I was definitely left for dead at that point.
So you was telling me that you started writing. Now you've got some books and things that you're working on, and then
Yeah.
you have to tell us about this ministry because you have a unique call. I think when you're in ministry, you there at some point you're called to something, and so like I feel like I'm called to the scattered sheep, but you're called to minister to, and how did you put it, to that person that's in that deep depression, that's in that hole, and it's not,
You're
oh,
not
you're,
too far gone.
yes,
Yeah.
what
Never
sparked
too
that
far gone.
flame? Yeah, what sparked that flame? Because I see you ministering online. You're calling souls to be saved.
Yeah, so well when all that happened, I mean God does refine our faith through fire, obviously. I don't know, we kind of talked about it last night how gold is refined. You throw it in there and it gets really, really hot, and then the gold's density makes it sink down to the bottom, and the impurities rise to the top. And that's kind of how God refines us, is through fire. So during that time, I really feel like that 8 to 10 months like strengthened my faith. And you know, I started writing shortly before. So, a few months before this started in my hands, it's now moved into my neck, and it's in my leg too. But uh, shortly before, I asked God, and I said, I noticed that I'm a good writer. I've written a few things. Um, please take my hands, and I want to be your hands, and I want to be your feet. Whatever I write, and use my gift to bring glory to you somehow. That's what I asked. And then, months later, I lost the use of my hands.
Oh no.
So the irony is real there. But then, even when all of this happened, I had nowhere to turn to. Even before my wife kicked me out, things were really difficult because
Hmm.
they were just really difficult. I lost 100 pounds in like 2 months.
Oh wow.
It was wild. And so she was going through a lot too. And you know, when I when I didn't have anything else, I just kind of kept hanging on to the Bible, because I did know that God was out there. And I'm a Christian. I was a Christian. I accepted Christ when I was younger, but I didn't really hang on to Him until I had nothing else. So God had to make that fire pretty hot,
Yeah.
um, in my perspective. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I had nothing else to hold on to. And then, as the miraculous way that God worked, He, brought my family back together. We've gone through
Amen.
marriage counseling.
Amen.
Um, we've done a whole lot of stuff. I'm 99% sure that this is the only time I ever thought that any narcissist could be cured by anything.
Wow.
And I didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was all God. I was gone for that 8 to 10 months. And yeah, God touched her heart in a really real way that's very evident now.
Okay. And so as far as this, but as far as this, like, where are you with the health, the the disorder? Like, you got your use of your hands back?
No, no, this will be chronic, maybe for the rest of my life. Um, and but that's okay. I firmly believe, because there's a lot of charismatics and stuff out there that are like, hey, you just gotta believe. Like,
Have that
man,
faith.
I'm
Yeah.
telling you, like, I'm believing pretty
Yeah.
hard,
I
dude.
I'm telling you, I believe with you. Yeah.
And it's like, I don't. I think that for a very long time, I thought that God was doing me an injustice, and that I wanted to be healed and that I deserved to be healed. Um, but then while I was talking, I meet with a biblical mentor every week, and when I was talking to him this last time, it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, I don't, I don't know. It's stuff that only God can do.
That's where we are. We got to leave things in God's hand at the end of the
Yes.
day. Remember, your faith should not lie in the hands of man, but in the power of God. And that is a true statement. I believe in that much more, even every day. And I've been reading the Bible 30 years, but there's always something new that I've learned in the Word of God. We're always learning. We're always
Oh,
learning.
yes, ma'am. Always having our faith refined.
Yeah. And where are you with the ministry part? I know you were into. You said
Well,
that.
yeah. So that's I've been on a very long journey,
Okay.
in regards to the trauma and stuff like that, and working through it. And I've made a decision to kind of go after my heart and love God with all of my heart instead of intellectually, so much. And some of that involves making myself a little bit more vulnerable. And
Okay.
I didn't know how to do that, like according to the Bible. And so I started getting into this thing called uh, transformation prayer ministry,
Okay.
and I'm almost done with it, but it's God led me to it in a really strange way, and now, that's what I'm gonna have to that's his next thing on my list. It requires getting really honest with yourself about your emotions and the things that guys don't usually like to get honest about.
I think it's going to be a unique ministry. I think once you get to that and publish some of these writings, maybe you can come back on the show. Maybe,
That'd be a great. I'd
please.
love to come back.
Okay. Well, we would love to have you. We definitely do appreciate you coming out again. This guest's name is Isaac Chambers. We are looking forward to more coming from him in the near future. Again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for another episode of Let's Talk. And until next time, God bless and be safe.